I think you sound great too. It's pretty good to have just a group of men singing, isn't it? So here's what happened. I'd been an elder about 8 years, and this is what we decided to do. We had men, the younger ones that I referenced a while ago, who were just naturally. Don't you think you kind of know who your future elders are going to be, or maybe don't you have a kind of a sense of it ahead of time? And we did. We had 5 men in that church who we believed, younger men who were about ready. Now they weren't quite ready, and sometimes it's because they still had a teenager at home. It's not wrong for a man to become an elder if he's got a teenager, but it does give you pause. Is he going to be away from home too much? And is this a disservice to that teenager? And so again, not wrong, but probably ought to consider that. Anyway, we had 5, and so we created an elder. This is my term, and I call it elder grooming program. Let's get them ready. And so what we did was to go to each of their houses. We call them, make an appointment, the whole eldership, and I guess what was that? 3 of us, I guess. But we want to talk to you. Can we come to your house on Tuesday night? And we would say, now there's not a problem. It's nothing about any problem because you could scare them to death. And so we just want to come talk to you. So sit down. Now we didn't tell anybody else about who we're going to see that night. We had 5 appointments that we made, but we didn't spread this. It was very confidential. And to say, sit down, and we would say, we came to talk to you about becoming one of our elders. And our goal is that in 2 years, on the first Sunday of January, 2 years hence, that we're going to ordain you as one of our elders. Now, what we came to do is to challenge you to an elder preparation program that we want to conduct. This is not an obligation, and it's fully within your choice about whether to do this or not. We just came to tell you that we believe that you're a man of the kind of qualities that we need to lead this church as an elder. And now you'd have to add to that. We don't know about what the next 2 years will hold. And so this is not a guarantee that you'll become an elder, of course. It may be that you get into this program with us and this training with us, and that you decide this isn't for me and I don't want to do it. Well, you will have that prerogative, and you can back out without any shame. Or it may be that there will be some things in the church that happen and it relates to you, whatever it is, and you won't become an elder. But it's our anticipation. We expect that that's what's going to happen if you choose to accept this. And in each case, every case of the 5, they said the same thing after we made that pitch, and it was, I'd like to have a week or two to talk it over with my wife. Now, we invited the wives to be there, so it would be both of them in every case. I'd like a chance to talk to her and to pray about this for a little while. And can I bring you my answer then? And the answer, of course, was that's the right answer. That's what you want to hear. And so that's how that happened. So we arranged that visit. We had that visit. We explained that it would take 2 years. That's what we were allowing for this. Now, part of that duration, that seems like a long time, part of that duration was that we were going to have a class that would meet every Sunday morning in lieu of their regular classes. The current elders would bring them into a room for a class, and I'm going to talk about that some more in a few minutes. And I'll take your questions too, because I may leave things out, but I didn't want myself, I didn't want to have an end to the class time. I didn't want to say we're going to do this for 3 quarters. What if we needed to go further? What if that wasn't enough? So my idea was that we won't put an end to it. I mean, except for 2 years. We're going to provide plenty of time to have this class and to study through these things. And if we wind the class up earlier than that's fine. So we made it a 2-year program. And here were the assignments. If he said, yes, I want to do it, or yes, I want to know more about it, the assignments went like this. We want you to read through the Bible once a year, every year. We want you to conduct private Bible studies. You need to be able to sit down with a person. If this hasn't already happened in your life, you need to be able and equipped to sit down with an individual and teach him the gospel and bring him to Christ. And so what we're going to do, we need to saturate you with this. And so we're going to send you to one of our mission fields. You can go to Argentina. You can go. I mean, we've done this, Argentina or South America. You can go to Ukraine. There are places that you can go, and you can start in the morning, early in the morning, with Bible studies with people, and you can do it all day long. They'll sign up. They'll line up to come and do it. That's not probably true in the U.S. I don't know anywhere in the U.S. where that's true, but you can do it overseas where you line them up and they'll just study with you all day long. So let's get those men there. I want you to go. We'll fly you, and we'll maybe send two of you or whatever we have arrange it. But we want to saturate you with studying the Bible one-on-one with people. Now, already they're apt to teach, but that may not be one-on-one. That may be that they teach classes and they know the Bible, but they may not have so much experience with this kind of evangelism one-on-one. Well, we want elders who have this experience, and so we need to facilitate that. And so that meant a plane ticket and pay some expenses and get them over there to spend, a week or 2 weeks doing this. And when they come back, they'll be different, right? Now, before they leave, they're going to probably want to sit down with somebody in the church that already does this and train with them, get them ready to go, and then we're going to pay for it and get them over there. We want you to. These are instructions we gave them for the elder grooming program. We want you to rotate where you sit in the auditorium. Every Sunday, sit somewhere different. Now, I see some of you guys nodding. You understand why? It's because they may be sort of part of this group and not really even think about it, not even realize that we sit with these same people every Sunday. Well, let's change that, because as an elder, you're going to be involved in all these people's lives. So every Sunday, sit somewhere else. We want you to visit the elders meeting every 6 weeks or so to listen to that meeting. Now, of course, at this point, the elders would still be reserved about things that were very confidential to the elderships. They wouldn't reveal that at this point, those kinds of things. But what they would do is have open conversations about more generic things, and they would encourage these future elders to contribute to that meeting. Okay? We want to hear what you have to say. Let them get their feet wet. Let them get into those conversations. As I will add this, that as the time grew closer and it was obvious that they were going to be put before the church, incidentally, we ended up ordaining 3, as I recall, 3 of those men, of the 5. And the other 2, I don't remember but one of them, which one it was, but I think he still will be an elder one day. He just wasn't ready. But we had 3 that were. So as time grew closer, what we wanted them to do was to come to every week to the meeting, and before, when it became inevitable that we believe they would be elders, then you would sort of turn the temperature up on what kinds of things they would be made privy to. We want you to be involved in our Sunday night visitation with your wife. If you haven't been completely involved, we want you to add that to your list of things that you're plugged into. We wanted them to read brotherhood periodicals. And so we funded that, but we want to make sure that you get a subscription to Spiritual Sword magazine, maybe Gospel Advocate. It's not being printed now, but 2 good brotherhood periodicals, so that they can be made aware of, in a keener way, of issues going on in the brotherhood, and they would be more familiar with those things. We got them some books. There's a great book by Bobby Duncan called The Elders Among You. There's one called Shepherds Wake Up, and other books that would be helpful. I would add Awake at Night. We'll talk some more about Awake at Night in just a couple of minutes. Well, what happened then is, so this is to give you an idea about the kind of things we would assign to them. And what happened shortly, I don't know if it was even 2 weeks, but one of the wives came to us and said, of these prospective elders, we don't know how to be elders' wives. And can we have a class too? And I felt like a real dummy, because why didn't I think of that? I just never thought of it. And the answer was, of course. And so we created a similar class with the current elders' wives and these ladies. And they would go in a classroom. As I recall, they did it on Sunday like we did, in lieu of a regular class. They'd go and sit down in there in a private. We didn't advertise all of this. It was just done, and not with any fanfare. What kinds of things can you think of that would need to be talked about with those elders' wives, potential elders' wives? How to take care of your shepherd husband. What is unique about this man as a shepherd? Well, who is it that can answer that question? And that is, it's wives of elders. They know what's different, what's unique, what are his pressures now that he's an elder, and what's it going to be like, and how do I make sure I take care of him? The last thing I think that a godly woman would want to do with her elder husband is to make his life harder, because he's doing something that's terribly important in the church, and wouldn't she want to? I know that she's human and he's human, and they have a marriage like everybody else, so I know that. I'm just saying that it seems to me that she could render a great service to the church if she really worked to make his life easy and not harder. The importance of keeping private things confidential. Do you think that ought to be mentioned in that meeting? You cannot talk about things that you learn, that you happen to be privy to, that go on in the elders' meetings. Even if you learn them, you cannot talk about those. That will cripple the elder, your husband, that will cripple the eldership and hurt the church. I think that they should talk to those wives about avoiding the temptation to lead the church by leading their husbands. You think a woman might want to do that, to say, you know what, I've been wanting to do something different. This church ought to be different, and I have my opinions about that, and now I can speak to that through him. I can get into the eldership through my husband. And you reckon that ever happens? It happens sometimes. I know this is real, but it's just kind of laughable that something would be on the table for the elders to discuss, and one elder would say, well, I'd like to wait till next meeting to give my opinion about that. And what he was doing was, what he was doing. He was going home to get his wife's permission, or for her to tell him what he should think. And so don't you think this is a good time to review those kinds of issues, is when these current elders' wives are talking to the potential elders' wives. They need to warn them about how as an elder's wife, you're going to be sitting probably out there in that lobby for some long periods of time when there are unexpected meetings. And just expect that, and bring your knitting, because it's just a sacrifice that you're going to make to be the wife of an elder. All right, so then we had the class, and each Sunday we would do it. Now, the way that we did it was that we would rotate which elder drove the train on that day. So all three of the elders would have things that they felt like were important. What our goal was to turn over every doctrinal rock that we could think of, so that what we wanted to avoid, we did it so that you wouldn't ordain a man and then, in 6 months he's teaching a Bible class and he teaches something that's just way out there, and you think, oh no, what have we done? Because that could be very dangerous. Well, what if we preempt that? And we already think he's a godly and wonderful man. That's why we're having him in here. We're working with him like this. But let's talk about doctrine. Now, there would be some Sundays when the man might say, well, I don't really have an opinion about that. I've never thought about it. Well, that's not a bad answer. That's okay. So let's talk about it. And here are the pros and cons and the give and take of that, and to educate him so that won't be new to him. Now, what you can do is help safeguard the church. I said a while ago, how does a church remove a bad elder? How do you go about that? If his sin if he gets involved with some woman or some egregious sin, you'd say, well, he would be subject to church discipline like anybody else. That's true, except that you're apt to split the church. I mean, it's not that. I don't know why the Scripture doesn't give us a play-by-play about how to carry out the removal of an elder when he goes bad. He goes rogue and he goes bad. And it doesn't happen often because of the qualifications, but it could happen, and the Bible leaves that to us. The same principles about church discipline surely would apply to an elder, the best time to correct that problem would be before you appoint him. And so these classes are just so important. So we talk about everything. You think we should talk about social drinking? Or should we just wait and go ahead and appoint him and then let that, should we, what do you think about that? And this just popped into my mind. One of the most challenging things for a new elder, and I guess there are a lot of new challenging things. It's a wonderful experience. I'm really honored that I got to do it. But one of the challenges is knowing when you can make a unilateral decision. Because what's going to happen when he becomes an elder is that before and after worship, people are apt to come up to him and say, would it be okay for us to do this or that? And he really, what he's being asked is to speak for the eldership. And he is an elder, but he needs to discern between when it's appropriate for him to give an answer or that he says, well, I tell you what, let me talk to the other guys and then we'll get back with you. I think there comes a time, if you've been an elder for quite a while, where you know the eldership, and most of those questions you can answer because you know where the eldership is. But you got to be careful as a new elder not to, well, okay, here's one. We had a summer camp. We have a summer camp, and it's our week. The camp belongs to a board of directors, but it's just for congregations of the churches of Christ. And then, so you come and you rent the camp, and so that's how it's kept sustained. And our week, we have 1 week every year. And so all the counselors are people from West Huntsville, and the kids can invite guests, but predominantly it's West Huntsville kids. Well, anyway, it's a great thing, and it's wonderful, and I like to go out and speak. Well, I got out to camp one day, and there was one elder on the ground, one elder that happened to be there that week, and he was one of our new guys. And he said, could I talk to you about something? Sure. I'd been an elder for quite a while, and I was about to get out, but he had recently come in. Can we talk? Sure. What happened? Well, he said, there's this teenage girl, and she came from a rough home. Well, I knew the girl, and said, she approached me, and she said that she wanted to be baptized. And she said, but I want my counselor to baptize me, a woman. I want my counselor to do that. And can she baptize me? And the elder said, well, how will that be handled? And will other people be there? No, it's just the two of us to go down there. And so he said, okay, go ahead, and did that. Now, I should rush to the end of the story, which is that the validity of a baptism does not hinge on the righteousness of the one doing the baptizing. And I'm not sure that we could declare such a baptism invalid. What I know is that every example I see in the New Testament, the person was baptized by a man. But the emphasis of baptism is upon the one who is repenting and coming to Christ. And so, anyway, there's a problem with it, and that is, what about next year? And are you going to have a bunch of girls wanting to be baptized, and they want their female? And then what happens with is this? You've got an upheaval that's about to happen, right? It's better for the elders to make a decision about this that's going to prevent any kind of problems in the future if they can. And what happened is he just made a decision on the spot. And after the fact, and by the way, it was privately handled. Baptism happened, and so then he got to worrying about it after the fact. It was worrisome. I tell you that story not because I wish to embarrass him. He's a great elder, and that's been several years ago now. One of the challenges the young guys are going to face is when it's appropriate to make a unilateral decision, a decision by themselves on the spot. And for younger elders, it's just so much better to learn this and to say, I tell you what, let me get back with you tomorrow. And that way, he's speaking for the eldership in a way that is really right. In the class, we talked about confidentiality. We talked about being prepared for praise and criticism. We talked about how that we will not have a head elder. Each elder serves under the other elders. Now, how do you deal with that, gentlemen, if you have one man who's more assertive? And that's going to be. And I think in most elderships you probably have a man who is more assertive and one that's less. And I don't think that's a bad thing. God knew what He was doing when He constructed this out of human beings. But don't you think we ought to have some speechment to it among ourselves, Brother Smith? We really appreciate how well you talk to people in public, and how you make announcements, and you're the best at it, and all that's true. What we need to do, though, is protect the church from any impression that we ever have a head elder. And what I would say to that man, that gentleman, is let's you use your talents for good. I would say to that assertive man, anytime something comes to the table in the elders' meeting, it'd probably be prudent for you to not speak first, because you may have a quelling effect on the others. Maybe you're very respected, but everybody's got to be able to have a voice at that table for this to be a healthy eldership. So you hold off. I would suggest that if you have a man who has been typically the spokesman for the elders, or he's just of that nature, that most of the time you ought to pick the other guys to be the spokesman that come before the church. Get them in front, and you'll quell this thing about a head elder. We can't have that. Delegating. We need to teach about delegating and let the deacons do their work. So you have Acts chapter 6 and verse 2. Those men seem an awful lot like deacons to me. And it's not reasonable, they said, the apostles said, that we should leave the word and serve tables. We had a job to do. Well, I think that's true about elders too. And elders love widows, and I don't think it's wrong for them it's a good thing for after potlucks to see an elder out there wiping down a table. I think all of that is good. What is not good is that he takes so many responsibilities that should be deacons, and he fails to be a shepherd. Okay? And that's what the apostles, are arguing in Acts 6. So we've got to delegate to our deacons. Briefly, every deacon needs to have his own specific responsibility. I would argue that we don't need deacons at large. I preached somewhere, I don't remember where, but I got to the back of the auditorium that first morning, and I was meeting people, and this gentleman said, "I'm so-and-so," and the fellow next to him said, he was made a deacon last week. "Oh, that's great. I'm so glad. Now, what is your responsibility?" And he said, "Well, I don't really know." And I thought, come on now, elders, come on, you can do better than this. Every deacon ought to have a role, and he knows what that is. But not just that, you ought to budget money. If he's in charge of the vans, he's in charge of the widows, he's in charge of the building of grounds, he's in charge of whatever it is. When you make your budget out each year, make a line item for that job, and then give him the ability to spend those monies for what he's supposed to do. Put it on his shoulders. And if he needs more money, if it's getting too tight, then let him come back and say, "I need another $500 or $1,000 or something, put into my account so that I can do this work." And then don't breathe down his neck. If you don't trust him, don't make him a deacon. Make him a deacon because he can handle this work, and then delegate that and get it away from the elders and let him handle his work. And then what you can do is call him in once or twice a year to sit down with the elders and say, "Tell us how your thing is going, and how can we help you with your job, and are there any problems that we need to talk about?" And so you can regulate that as elders, but still do the smart thing and let him have his job, delegate to him. So financial matters. We needed to talk about financial matters, and we did that with them. We have different accounts, and here's what they are, and here's why these exist. The need for savings and a philosophy about how much money a church ought to have in reserve. Is that important? How much money is appropriate? I talked to an elder the other day in another state, and they had some circumstance where they had a big insurance payoff on an accident, and it was all legitimate, nothing ill about it, except that they got a ton of money that was just dumped on them, and they put it in their account, and briefly, their building was destroyed. They got the insurance payoff on that. At the same time, a church 5 miles up the road or so had disbanded, and they said, "We'll just give you our building." So they got a free building that required very little maintenance, very little renovation, and they got this big check at the same time. So there's the story. And so they have this bucket of money, a barrel of money that was dumped on them. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And what are your plans for the money? What do you plan to do with this? Well, he said, we're going to put it in an interest-bearing account, and just we don't have any plans for it. We're going to keep it because you never know, you know. Well, where's the right line for that? Where's the right line? And I said, well, he's a friend of mine. I said, I think that's a real blessing, but don't you be letting the Lord come back and that money burn when you need to be using it for good things. So decide where that is. What's that line? And what is appropriate. Now, I don't know what that is. That's a judgment call. But that's something we needed to talk about in elder grooming, right? They needed to think about the philosophy of money. They needed to talk about and learn about how people place membership. And by that I mean that anybody that comes to place membership, the elders need to sit down with them before they place membership, right? And talk to them. Now, the way that our elders do it, and this is not original with me, but I think it's a great idea. So here's a couple, they're presenting themselves to place membership, and there's a list of things that as elders you want to know about them. And right now in your mind, you can think of things on that list. So the way that we do it is that each elder in the room will take turns. Whoever's the chair for that month will start. My name is Glenn Colley, and I've been a member of the church since I was 13. I was baptized when I was 13. And I've been at West Huntsville for 22 years. And I really love this church, and we're just so glad that you've come. And I was baptized at this point, and I got married when I was this age, 21, and Cindy and I met at school, and we've been married for this many years. And those kinds of things. We have 3 children. We have 2 children, 3, whatever it is, and so you explain that. The point is, gentlemen, and this is the secret of this brilliant idea, is that you tell them the things you want them to tell you. And each man in the eldership, you take turns. So the chair would start, then the next one would say, my name is this, and here's when I was baptized. And I was baptized in Elk City, Oklahoma, when I was 15 in the Church of Christ there. And I met my wife, and he tells the same kinds of things, that same data, information, and every elder does. And then the elders say, now you know something about us. Tell us about you. It will never fail that they're going to tell that same information. They will every single time. And in reference to their marriage, for example, sometimes, most of the time they would say something that was scriptural, everything was square. I remember one meeting that a man and his wife and sweet couple had a little girl, and they said, well, now, we were baptized XYZ, and now we've both been married before. And so one of us said, well, tell us more about that. What happened with your first marriages? And she said, well, my husband had a girlfriend, and he was cheating on me, and so I divorced him and married this brother. And oh, that's fine. And what about you? What about your circumstance? And he said, well, mine wasn't about adultery. He said, we just married too young, and we got tired of each other, and so we wanted to think about that. At which time, at that moment, the wife turned to him and said, what? And I think I was chair that night, and I thought, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And so he said, no, it wasn't about that. She said, your sister told me that your wife cheated on you. And he said, no, that wasn't it. It was, and so the wife, who knew the truth about MDR, she kind of started coming apart. And I said, tell you what, wait a minute. I really think that this is something that the two of you need to talk about alone. And so why don't we go ahead and stop now? And y'all do that. Go on home, and let's set up another meeting and we set up another time to sit down when they had gone through this. But do you think that was important to do? See, because what could happen about this subject or about a lot of other subjects is that they don't surface until after these people are members of the church and they get their lives entwined. Now, that doesn't mean that that if a person says, I've got struggles in my life, that we're not going to let them place membership. Of course we are, because that's true about all of us, isn't it? But it does mean that if there's outstanding sin in their lives about which they're impenitent, it doesn't make any sense to bring them in and to immediately start disciplining because they're living in some overt sin. Are you with me? And so it is smart to have this conversation and talk through things. And so we also have a questionnaire. It's very gentle, very gentle. It includes what kinds of works would you like to get involved in the church, and here's a list of things from which you can choose. But what we don't want to do is to harm them because we didn't do a good job. All right. The time comes to ordain them. And so I preached the sermons. I think you go through the same process, even if you have an elder grooming program, and you preach the sermons, and then you ask the church for suggestions. And the truth is that you already, if you're a member of that church long term, you know which guys are probably the most qualified, and you already know who the most qualified men are. They rise to the surface and have already. But it's still the right thing for the church to be involved. And you ask for suggestions. And then we made a point to go to every man who was suggested. But sometimes, some of those men won't even have any children. They're just not qualified. But we went to every one to say, and I did this myself, to say, brother, I want you to feel complimented because your name was submitted, because you're a godly man and people love and respect you here. And I know your response to this. I just want you to know that your name was submitted, and I just want you to feel complimented by it. Well, thank you, Glenn, but I don't have any kids. I understand. So that's what we did. We did it with every single man whose name was submitted. And when it came down to it, we ordained 3, and all 3 were part of this program that we had prepared, and we made them elders. I stayed in, and one of our others that was older stayed in for about a year to help them get their legs, and then we resigned. And now, immediately I began serving under them, and I have for a long time now. And that's fine with me. That's just fine with me. They're doing a great job, and I love them. Who has questions about the elder grooming program? Yes, sir. The dynamic. Mm-hmm. Elders. I think in a church that already has elders, I think that it's smarter if they have 3 men that are qualified. I don't think they have to do this, matter of opinion. My opinion is that it would be smart to ordain one of them a year. And because if you put 3 in, especially let's say you have 2 elders or even 3, and you bring in 3 at one time, it may be too big a shock. And that's just an opinion, and you don't have to hold that opinion. But I think it's more prudent to bring in one at a time and let them get acclimated. Now, that brings up another subject, which is what I'm teaching about today in this elder grooming program is for a church that already has elders. What if you don't have elders? And the answer to that is that I think you still create an elder grooming program, but you may need to bring somebody in from another congregation. What if you brought in a couple of good elders from a nearby congregation and asked them to do this job, to create an elder grooming program over a period of time? I think that could work. It would still be far better than not doing it, I think. And so however you wanted to design it, what we're trying to do is the whole purpose of this is to avoid not doing a good job of helping these men prepared for this job. That's it. So getting somebody else to help them if you don't have elders would be smart. It's okay. The greatest suggestion for how as Flavel Nichols, great gospel preacher, my friend, used to say, an elder can be appointed and he can be disappointed. And that's right. But it's risky, it's dangerous, it has fraught with dangers. So the best thing you can do is an elder grooming program where from the get-go you put inside of his heart that none of us are going to be a problem in this eldership. And if we take a wrong turn somewhere and the other elders say, you're hurting the church, we'll just resign. Now, I know that a man can go kind of crazy and maybe he won't want to do that when it's time, but that's the first thing I would do to plant that seed that none of us are going to hurt this church. And then it's going to have to be try to handle it internally in that eldership and ask him to resign. Ask him to beg him, preserve this church. Don't hurt these people. You'll divide the church if you don't. And unless he's just real mean, he'll see that and he'll do the right thing. The end thing that you would do is that you would mark him, and the other three elders, two elders, or whatever you've got, would actually have to make this public if the church is going to be at risk. Romans 16:17, you just have to mark him, and that would be an awful thing. Yeah. You know, what he's suggesting is about that some congregations have an elder rotation. So you serve 5 years and then everybody's out and we bring in a fresh thing. I don't appreciate that. I don't believe it's right. Uh, how can that be right? I think it's a recipe for disaster. I just don't support that idea. Yes, sir. Yeah. Great question. And the answer is that we didn't. And I don't know if that's the best way. So I think each church needs to make their own decision about that. At the time, we didn't know another church that was doing this, which of course, what I think is that every church should do this in some way, whatever way you think is the most appropriate. But I did come upon a church, and I think it was in California, that was doing it. And what they would do when they started the program was to take the elders they were grooming and bring them before the church with their wives and make an announcement and pray about them. Well, I don't think that's a wrong thing to do, but I think it has some issues with it. If they choose not to do it, if the elders decide that this is not the right way, or there's just things. I think you have to be careful about jealousy too. And if you're creating jealousy, and how come you didn't pick my son to be one of these men? You don't want to create that. So the way that we did it was to just not make any fanfare. We didn't make any announcements. I guess people would see us going into the classroom on Sundays sometimes. We just went to an office there to sit down. We didn't make a to-do over it. And again, we told these men that they may not become elders. Maybe they won't. We'll just see, but we anticipate it. Yes, sir. I'm not sure I understand your question. So after you appoint them, you mean? Mhm. Good. Oh, to actually do it. Good. Okay, that's a great question. Titus 1, Paul the apostle puts that on the shoulders of the preacher to lead it. And so if I were you, um, you're young, and I know you're doing a great job. You might find a trusted older preacher in the area to bring in to do it with you and to kind of advise you through it. Somebody that's familiar with this sort of thing, and then you do it. I would do it on a Sunday. I would probably give a couple of weeks to the church to say, our intention is to appoint these two men or these three men to be elders 2 weeks from now. If anybody has any reason that they know that would prevent these from being elders. And I would preach the sermons from the qualifications. So you could make this announcement and then preach those sermons, take enough time, maybe 3 weeks even, to preach the sermon so it's fresh on the people's minds. And that seems logical to me because they can compare those qualifications with these men. Do they meet the qualifications? And if not, then they could bring those to you, those concerns. I am. I would say the precedent, it wouldn't be bad for you to lead this and to ask the church for suggestions. I think that would be prudent because that's what happened in Acts 6. But the precedent that we have is Titus 1. And Paul said, preacher, I want you to do this. And so I know that what that does to your mind to think about all the different variations of that, nuances, but that's the precedent. And so I think you should do it. And I think again, seeking out maybe an older man to help might be an advantage to you, but the preacher's the one who would do it. Subsequent to that, because the elders are the presbyteros over the church, in future times, I think it's the elders who ought to do it. Who knows better, and they're the head, they're the leaders. So there you are. It's awful. It is. It's awful. But who else would be better in the church to do this job that you're talking about than the preacher? In theory, he knows the Bible as well as, or better than anybody else in the church. He studies it all the time, and he's a public proclaimer of the word, and he's the one Paul selected. Now, we had somebody say last night, well, maybe Titus had miraculous knowledge. Maybe he did, but it doesn't say it. And the precedent still is Titus 1. There you are. Yes, sir.
Well, what would he do if, and I don't know what congregation he's at, but what if the congregation has had business meetings for so long, they're so used to that they're very resistant, and they don't want anything, they don't want to do it.
That's great.
What does he do then if he preaches the sermons and tries to get this started, and the congregation resistant?
That's a great question. Yeah, okay. Did everybody hear that? What does he do if the church is resistant? They're used to men's business meetings, and they don't want to change that. Don't rock the boat. And the answer is that I think it would be similar to any other doctrinal error that was in that church. A man who's the preacher would have to teach about it, and he would do so prudently. He wouldn't do it to say, I'm going to come in and bust this, because he'll just destroy things, and that's not what he should do. So if you found out that your congregation was like that, you might take some time, but you would preach about it, and you would get very, very direct about these passages. I would preach the sermon about, I would just preach there are 4 possibilities about how we are organized. Just like I talked about this, I would preach that sermon, and you would develop each of those 4 points and just make it clear. Here's the way that the Holy Spirit organized the church in the Scriptures. And then if there's still pushback, you would deal with that. But you know what? Our job is to teach the truth and to do our best, and to do so prudently. I never want men to go in there and just blow things up, because that's not good for anybody. So you're prudent, but you're deliberate and intentional. It is, and it takes wisdom. And you know what? It's not bad for younger preachers, and I don't mean to insult you in any way. I don't know how old you are. I know you're a good man, but I know when I was a younger preacher, it was of great benefit to me to call older men who I knew and get them to help me walk through things. And I'm sure they helped me avoid some mistakes I could have made. But you're the preacher, and the one who directs this is you. Titus chapter 1. Somebody else? All right. I want to repeat one more thing, and then we're going to take a 5-minute bathroom break and then get back in here to do what we want to do, and then we'll have lunch. You've been very patient and good, and I appreciate your participation. About the elder grooming program, let this class be the planting of a seed in your mind that we need to do this some way, but you don't have to do it the way we did it. So what I hope you'll do is to take the idea and you can amend it to however you think would be the best. What I don't want you to do is to get into an emergency in your congregation and choose somebody that you haven't really worked with, you don't know. Don't take risks about this. It's just so hard to fix it when it's somebody who's serving the Lord at this level of leadership. It's hard to fix it. And I don't want you to have to do that. I want you to do the work before you make him an elder. And that's really what this is. And if I can ever help you, if you ever want to talk something over, I'll be happy to do it. Now, let's take